Hey everybody, it's Bobby Martinez from 914 TE. Welcome to my ELA Methods Review number 1 for the first I don't know, 5 weeks of class. So we've got our here's my picture, which I have taken copious notes on, of our ELA method schema. So I'm going to go through section by section. I know here you can't really discern the sections, but um, I thought it was a good way to organize my thoughts for reviewing what I have learned and how I am applying and will apply it to my classroom and my teaching methods. So we'll start at the beginning, which is, I know, again, kind of hard to see here, but we'll start with planning. So in planning for our class, I was really helped out by the whole schema theory from Piaget, which is metaphorical and uses analogy, and then the three A's that are association, assimilation, accommodation. So the theory of challenging students' existing schema, their existing way of associating material metaphorically. So the association being associating material with a pre-existing kind of mental bin or file. So they can easily fit it in, and then assimilation, where they have to kind of reshape the existing bin or file to fit in new information, and then the actual really challenging part where real important learning takes place when the accommodation, when they actually have to add new files or new sections of the schema to fit in the new information. Also, one of the things that I was, of course, I was very intent on being diligent about during my planning for the TPA and in lesson planning was backing up my methods with scholarship. So actually having a logical and coherent reason that is based in a text or a theorist to plan out my sequence. Why I'm doing what I'm doing in that order, because I can explain why I'm doing it like individually for different exercises, but what I really was kind of hoping to improve on and build into my planning for the TPA is the kind of the next higher level tier of organization, defending that with scholarship, which is the sequence of the activities. Of course, connecting plans to the Common Core standards. I'm getting pretty good at that now, actually, I think. And then one of the things I found that was helpful too was planning the readings in. When I'm planning reading is qualitative, quantitative, and reader and task dimensions, and that's out of the Common Core standards. It's referenced in Burke too. But as far as like not just looking at, what kind of things do I want the what kind of cultural or figurative language or kind of more aesthetic or human elements of the text, the qualitative ones, because that's what I've tended to focus on, but also the more quantitative ones, the lexical scores and things like that, and the different types of quantitative reading and text evaluations, paying more closer attention to those. I enjoy learning about those and employing them in my lesson planning, which is what I'm going to have to do for Mice and Men pretty soon for our class. And then reader and task dimensions. So looking more towards language, function, and demand, and taking the text to say what is it that I'm going to ask them to be able to do and how I'm going to enable them to do that. Also referenced by Kinsella, Feldman, and Burke was the independent instructional and frustration level text of a text. Where you kind of evaluate what can they read on their own, what they need help to read, and what are they currently incapable or get frustrated by as far as reading goes. So, of course, this ties in, I think, a little bit to also the zones of proximal development with Vygotsky. So that's all taking that into consideration when planning. Next thing I wanted to look at was background knowledge. So this is one of the next parts of our ELA schema here. Considering students' culture and experience in planning lessons. assessing what they know, activating what they do know, and then activate what they don't know they know, and then applying that knowledge. How do we get them to build on and apply that knowledge? And of course, connecting their personal experience to material in order to give them a frame to work with it. I've really enjoyed this part of my teaching so far, getting to know my students, giving them the reader interest survey, and kind of finding ways to unlock their knowledge through what they're about, culturally, and with their hobbies, with their interests, which is also important in Vygotsky's theories of learning as far as cultural and social interaction, as opposed to Piaget was more of kind of set benchmarks and structures for when they reach cognitive development. So also activating background knowledge in class builds rapport with students. Marzano went on about that. And I've experienced that firsthand, and I am looking forward to building more interesting ways to do that, to get to know my students on a deeper level. Let's see here. Academic language was one of the next sections of our ELA schema. So learning to discern between language functions demand. So language function, what must the student be able to do with the language once they access it? So that's the higher level orders of actual abilities they have to achieve. So analysis, comparing and contrasting, theorizing, and then the demands, how we expect them to be able to do or accomplish that function. Why is a task difficult? In other words, what does a student be asked to do, and how do I, as a teacher, help them to do it? What do they need to access the material? So, of course, this involves giving them appropriate vocabulary, having structuring discourse in a way that is exploratory and fulfilling for the student, and then, of course, the syntax, the way academic language itself is structured. The academic language being language used for a purpose in a pursuit of knowledge. Academic language, vocabulary, we were talking about multiple tiers of words. Tier 1 words being the ones that are super easy and very common. Tier 3 being the ones that are domain specific and kind of the more elite status of words that are only important within a certain specific area or domain. And the Tier 2 words, which I kind of consider like the nuts and bolts words that are academic, they're widely applicable. You can deploy them in many situations. You see them a lot, but they're not common everyday words. They're words that are more purposeful and common in the academic language circle. So those are the ones that we want to kind of tend to teach. And then cognitive development results from internalization of new language. So the way they're going to learn, the access and improve and push their zones of proximal development is to internalize that new language, to give them the cognitive ability to access new ideas and talk about them intelligently. Moving along to vocab instruction, where I just mentioned 3 tiers of words. I just went over that. I wrote about this in my responses, but dictionaries I think are important in classrooms. Burke went on about this in chapter 7. I know that we're not supposed to be teaching straight out of the dictionary and just picking words at random or words that we think they need to know, but words they were actually that evolve organically from the text. What are the texts that we're working with? What do those need to be able to what do those texts demand they know as far as vocabulary? And then dictionaries can be helpful to give them synonyms and context for those words. We must select words that allow students to interact with the reading on its terms, facilitating the student's execution of desired language function. So what vocabulary do we need to give the students to allow them to have a conversation with the text that they're working with, and then in turn converse about that with students and teachers in order to produce the desired language function. Then we've got close reading, the center of it all, which is the center of our ELA schema diagram, if you couldn't tell from my picture, but it was there. We have to set a goal, a purpose for reading, so we need a mission, a target, something tactical or strategic they need to do, and not just tell them to read it just because we want them to read it. We have to frame the text to make them relevant to students' culture and experience. Burke talked about this in his text, being able to give them a slice that they can slice of the text to frame a bigger picture and relate it to their own experience, or else they won't internalize it. Reading multiple times to build confidence, to build vocabulary, to build fluency, and to reframe thinking. So reading multiple times for different reasons, as we saw with the house exercise, which I thought was super fun, and which I actually used in my class and got really enthusiastic feedback for. Modeling, Bandura talked about this. We must model close reading. So one of the things that I'm having trouble with, well, not trouble, but I needed to pay more attention to, I guess you could say, in my classroom was slowing down and modeling step by step, almost sentence by sentence, what the text is asking us to think about, and what some of the better ways to talk about how we thought about it. Learn by doing. So by Dewey, so I had to put the text up on the overhead and just go sentence by sentence and highlight my train of thought as I analyze the text for them. So I had to let the students into my brain a little bit so they could see how I thought about it. But one of the challenges for me was to not just assume or do automatically the thinking, but to really slow down my thought process and explain it to them. But I think it's improving, and they got a lot out of it. I know that's a huge part of the TPA is being able to do that successfully. And then modeling engagement, or methods for engagement for students as far as how we get them to interact with the reading. Pair sharing callbacks, frame switch, student selection using cards. I use a dice roller for their seat corresponding to their seat and computer numbers, which is super effective. All of these I have put into play in my class so far, and I've gotten some great results. And then the next section of our ELA schema was scaffolding. So Burke refers to it as kind of an apprenticeship model, taking into account our special needs kids, giving them the tools they need to access that may be different from some of the other children in the class, but keeping in mind that eventually we have to lessen and remove it. So we have to take off the scaffolding if we eventually want the edifice, the intellectual edifice, to stand on its own. Tomlinson referenced differentiation as a necessary step to adapt individuals' learning and reading needs. And scaffolding also has to take into account the zones of proximal development, because these may be different for different students, especially if they're ELL or IEP or 504. I have several in my class that I kind of have to do, especially with, I have a student that has a visual impairment, so we've had to take some extra steps for her. And so I'm kind of learning the ropes still, but I know it's a crucial part of the TPA, which I need to do. So I've found this particular part of the reading is very helpful. And then we got the more knowledgeable other theory from Vygotsky, which is, I think, kind of corollary to the master and apprentice model, where it's you learn by doing, basically, and you watch someone else do it. It's the I do, we do it together, you do it with my help, and then you do it on your own kind of model. And then that's all. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to some more learning, and I'll see you all later.